Thank you, Arup. Actually, when I came on this session, I was wondering how am I on this session, and I was trying to struggle because I'm actually going to talk about something about our own industry's reputation. But then you've heard how much investments multinationals looking at, or what's happening in Middle East and China. So unless we do something dramatically different about our own industry and our image, a lot of this will struggle to make money. And so that's why I think I feel and I fit it in. The other thing I struggled in the morning when I was listening to Mr. Gopal Krishnan, and I said, I'm going to talk about something very similar to what he just said. But then I said, okay, I've spent 30 years of my career into the industry where I'm known as a chemical industry, known as a consumer industry or something else. So maybe I have a different passion for the same. Before we go anywhere, I think, let me just look at it the past first, how far we have come. This is a question that takes us to decades and centuries into the past. To truly understand where the chemical industry is today, we need to look back at our history. Observe the beginning of the science of chemistry. Understand where the scientists, alchemists, and practitioners came from, and how they have shaped the chemical industry as we know it today. Here is a rather traditional definition of our history. From ancient times to the medieval time, through the modern age, and down to present day, chemistry has progressed in leaps and breakthroughs. The areas it touches are many. Extracting metals from ores, making pottery and glazes, fermenting beer and wine, something which I'm very familiar with, and I love the industry for it. Extracting chemicals from plants for medicine and perfumes, transforming fats into soaps, and making alloys like bronze. Then let's look at how have this thing changed. Back when chemistry began, its practitioners were accorded huge amount of respect and a very high status in the society. The work they did was considered learned and mysterious. Then came the fork in the road as the field of chemistry divided itself into practice of medicine and the progress of industry. Chemicals were broadly divided into those that cured illness and those that went into products in the processes. Chemicals and chemistry became part of our daily lives. Newer discovery led to a greater adoption. For instance, whale oil and coal tar had been used to produce chemicals for years. However, once petroleum began to be extracted from the earth, it was used instead. The Industrial Revolution changed the equation for even further. No longer was chemistry only for certain kind of businesses, it was part of every single kind of industry. Chemicals were ingredients. They were part of the processes. They were part of the processes. Imagine the journey from refined petroleum to petrol and diesel to solvents, lubricants, waxes, and many other materials of modern world. Whether synthetic fibers or plastics, paints or detergent, pharmaceuticals or fertilizers. This was the chemical industry's heyday. We were successful, we were inventive, and we were everywhere you looked. Then came what I call the reputational crash. When it came, took us all by surprise. Globalization brought with a wave of environmental consciousness. As an industry, we were aware of this and did take some steps to acknowledge this sensitivity, but it was nearly not enough. Our collective tunnel vision kept us doing what we had been doing for decades, focusing on work and shipping out our products. We didn't realize that the world wanted to know what the chemical industry was doing. They wanted to be reassured that they would be safe and when well looked after in spite of all the technology advances which we've been doing further and further. We didn't stop to communicate, and that led us squarely to the lowest point in our industry. We began to see as the bad boys of the industry, and quite naturally, we became the whipping boy for anything negative in the business. Here is a turning point. While we were at lowest ebb, we refused to stay out. We refused to stay put. As an industry, once we realized our failings, we just threw our collective and substantial weight behind setting them right. We had no previous example or the history to guide us, as no other industry or the field has gone through such a dramatic rise and fall. Here's the thing. When you have an industry that practices the highest level of innovation, day in and day out, you end up with a pack of solutions that are quite different. Which other industry would put in practice a system like responsible care, for instance? Who else could adopt sustainability as a fundamental pillar rather than a peripheral benefit? The environment was certainly a very tricky one for us, but our proficiency in innovation helped us to negotiate it. Let me talk a little bit about responsible care. It was when all industry bodies set their sights on best practices, especially around environmental health and safety. We did the same, but with two added values. One, we would keep upgrading those benchmarks. And two, our membership will be 100% voluntary. Innovation. And I think a lot of speakers talk about innovation as a forefront of what we're doing. Innovation has long been hardwired into our thinking and our approach. Every client brief we receive is answered with creativity and resourcefulness. We took the same approach to move beyond our briefs. What began as a search for better products led to better deliveries, then added functionality and on to greater and more diverse benefit. We've got our eyes on few giant global problems: energy, health and nutrition, infrastructure, water, and more. After all, when you think about it, the solution for food, energy, and new materials cannot and will not come from any other place but our own industry. When you talk about sustainability, one of the most fundamental Dow values is respect for our environment. As an industry, we are allied in introducing newer and better ways to provide product that uses fewer natural resources to deliver greater good. And I think on a sustainability, I'll give you a small example. A lot of people talk about greenhouse emissions. I mean, Dow is the second largest chemical company after BASF. The amount of greenhouse emissions we do is, say, X. About 10-12% of our product gets used into insulation material, whether it's insulating your appliances, insulating your cars, homes, etc., etc. The amount of greenhouse emission 12% of Dow production saves is 6 times that of what Dow generates. And that is what our industry does, but we still get deemed as the bad boys of the industry. What was our role then? In the history, we were the backbone of businesses, driver of profits. When we look at our role now, there is a new sea change in the way our industry does things. The difference is how we do what we do, even though what we do remains much the same. A lot of time people ask me, can you define Dow? And I said Dow can be defined into 3 molecules, ethylene, propylene, chlorine. But what we do with those 3 molecules over 100 plus years of our journey is very different today. How we use those molecules is very different today. And I think that is what our industry needs to look at it. We touch lives on a daily basis, and I think something which I'm very proud of. And this is something we need to, historically what we do when we talk about automotive. In the past we'll say, well, we make polyurethane chemicals to make car seats. But in reality, we actually make drive enjoyable for a consumer. Because when you're sitting in a car for a long time in a very structured seat, it makes the difference. To improve the road safety, we look at the retro-reflective road marking paints. When you see those road marking on the paints, in the night it reflects, and that improves the safety of your night driving. From pioneering RO water purification in India to deliver purified, sweet, and great tasting water to building a high-performance cell phones. A lot of people don't think about cell phones and think about Dow. In fact, in our company, we joke about it today. Intel advertises itself that Intel inside in a lot of computers, and you're all familiar with it. Dow actually should be advertising saying we are inside Intel. 90+% of your cell phone will not function without Dow technology in product. When you look at the new OLED technologies, it's the Dow material which is making those technology breakthroughs. Which are you talking about? Smart cities. Everything which you talk about, that's where the product and services come. And then we talk about pharma industry, which is, sexy industries. What we do is, easy to swallow pill, coatings which we make, that makes the medicine treatment for children and elderly people piece of cake. And that's what we need to do. What is our task now? We are at a very interesting inflection point in terms of our history and our industry. It is now time for us to rally around and collaborate. Our once enviable position must be regained. We do drive change, and we must be seen as architect of it. And in doing all this, we will once again become an example to other industry. How do we get there? We need to communicate. There are many things for us to do as a member of chemical industry. Start to focus on benefits and not on product. Educate our consumers about standards of health and safety. Drive the change for partnering industry in a continuous innovation. And of course, embrace and share the best practices worldwide. We should continue on responsible care. Not just a certification, but a true value, which we all as an industry live by. Innovation. Let the R&D guide new and better products. Sustainability, adopt the best practices across the globe. And the last but the most important is communicate. Let people know how this industry touches their lives on a daily basis. I would close with this final saying, and by the way, I think Gopal Krishnan talked about chemical industry has been made for alphabets. DOW is not an alphabet. It's a family name of our founding father, Herbert Henry Dow. And he said it, if you can't do it better, why do it? And this has been my favorite Dow quote. It is usually used in context of pure innovation. But what it really is a request to reevaluate the conventional way of looking at things. As an industry, we too need to reevaluate our way of interacting with our consumers. We must share more. Our knowledge, our experience on a global basis, and our deep understanding of the human mind. We must lead more. Innovation is the deadliest weapon in the marketplace, and we must leverage it to refresh people's understanding of our industry and finally of us. Thank you.
Fabulous, Mr. Shah. He had 20 minutes and he's finished his talk in 15. That's a 25% return on time. That's the kind of numbers they work with. I think in terms of really the points that Mr. Gopalakrishnan had this morning and Vipul's right now, We have, as an industry, engaged with a lot of stakeholders for a variety of good and not so good reasons, but I think we haven't engaged with society at large adequately. And I think we have to now spend disproportionate time engaging with them on the theme of what we do and really keeping in mind an underlying theme of simplification. I'm a good one to talk because the soap that I used is called pH 5.5. But perhaps I'm an outlier, and I hope I am. But by and large, I think this is one responsibility that lies with us, because there'll be, as you said, there was Intel inside, people know about Intel. Nobody knows about what's inside. So I think this engagement has to happen, and it has to happen in a simple language with all our consumers. And so companies who are moving closer to the consumer will probably have to learn this art of conversation and maybe start getting people who have communication skills, who can simplify things, who are articulate in simplifying a scientific concept into something that a common man understands. And we have to invest in a disciplined way in this capability building across companies in this sector. And perhaps that will yield us good dividends going forward. Our last speaker for this session is Mr. John Lear, Senior Business Investment Manager from Tees Valley Unlimited. Lovely name. Special enterprise zones in the UK and perfectly fit for chemical industry, which ought to work in a cluster design. So over to you, Mr. Lear.
Thank you. I promised to make my presentation brief, not just because it would be almost impossible for me to explain the intricacies of the Tees Valley economy, but because as I was sat in my seat, it suddenly dawned on me that I'm actually now standing in the most dangerous place in the whole of the conference, because I'm the last man that stands between 250 people and a beautiful lunch. And when I put my glasses on, you all look very hungry, so I've taken them back off again. So I hope I promise I won't make you ring your bell. Now, I'd like to begin my presentation with a sincere thank you to the President and the members of the ICC for giving me an opportunity to speak with you and meet with you today, but also to extend my sincere gratitude to the companies that have played host to the delegation from the UK over the last few days. You've provided us with an insight and first-hand experience into the ambition and innovation that sits within the heart of industry within India. And it's without doubt that there'll be even more opportunities for you to continue to grow and expand into Europe, and for that reason I would like to engage with you. But that's not the real reason why I wanted to come to this conference. The reason why I wanted to come to this conference was to learn. I wanted to learn from my fellow speakers about the opportunities and challenges which face the global chemical industry, but also to learn from you individually as individual companies what your business plans are, what your opportunities are, but most importantly to engage with you. And as Ian said, Ian Wright, MP for one of our towns, it's about an engagement now for the future. So as a consequence of this short talk, I hope you find it interesting, but I hope it inspires you and you would like to come and talk to me over the course of the rest of the conference. I realise not many of you will know where Tees Valley is or know much about Tees Valley, so I'll explain where we are first of all. We're in the northeast of England. We're a coastal area. The area expands from 30 miles from west to east to the northeast coastline, and about 20 miles north to south. It encompasses 5 major towns: Darlington, Stockton, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool. Hartlepool is Ian Wright's constituency. And whilst we don't have a single major city within the region, we're classed by government as a city region area. And as a result of that, we have an economic zone status. The population in our area, and when I talk about populations for Tees Valley, it's certainly less impressive than some of the presentations that we've received by your colleagues over the previous days. The population of Tees Valley is about 700,000, within an easy commuting distance, and we would say that that's about a 30-minute drive for us because we don't like driving too long. We have about 1 million people of working age and economically active within the area. Now, when I talk about commute, logistics is at the very heart of Tees Valley. And within Tees Valley, the Department for Transport, our Ministry for Transport, has recognised that Tees Valley has the fastest flowing roads in the UK. Just to give you an example, my daily commute is 11 miles and I can complete that within 20 minutes. If I'm running late, I can manage to make it in 15, but that's just about legal in the UK in terms of our speed limit. Whilst we're a small area, we're quite a compact area, we have many of the UK's strategic manufacturing assets and strategic infrastructure. And I'll come on to that in the course of my presentation. But as an introduction, I'd really like to give you a brief overview of Tees Valley Unlimited, what we do, an overview of the economy, and the impact that enterprise zones and our status as a local enterprise partnership and our relationship with government has had over the last 3 years. Tees Valley Unlimited is a local enterprise partnership. That's a fairly new construct in the UK. It's come into force in the last 3 years. However, our organisation has been operating in partnership with the public sector, the local agencies within the area, and the local authorities, which are publicly funded, working hand in hand in partnership with the private sector. So our local authorities, our local public bodies provide the funding for the LEP, but it's very much the private sector that provide the leadership and help us determine our strategic economic plan and our investment priorities. And government has mandated Tees Valley Unlimited to develop a strategic economic plan for the area and look at where investments from central government should be placed over the next 10 years or so. And as a consequence of that, we have influence over industrial strategy, and we're very much helped by our local MPs, and we very much benefit from having one of the major policymakers in Ian Wright as a local MP for us. But it's helped us to shape government policy to the benefit of Tees Valley, and I'll cover that in a little bit more detail when I go on to talk about one specific issue, which is enterprise zones. So we have a relationship, a direct relationship with government, which we haven't had in the past, and we're using that to maximum impact. But we also have a relationship, a very strong relationship with cluster organisations such as NEPIC, which is, I think everyone would agree in the UK, it's the premier cluster organisation and a blueprint for cluster organisations and representing the process industry. But we also have clusters supporting our oil and gas industry, so Northern Offshore Federation, our defence industry and the Northern Defence Initiative, and within the automotive sector, the SMMT, and we work very closely with them to determine our policies. We work with the universities, of course, because the skills agenda is very much at the fore of our economic development policies, and we have 2 major universities in our area. Teesside University is a modern university, but has one of the UK's best reputations for business engagement. And Durham University is one of the Russell Group University of 24 that have an international reputation for research and development. And like India, we put innovation at the very heart of what we do and how we want to move our economy forward. So we work with the innovation agencies. We have the Centre for Process Innovation, which is looking at new manufacturing techniques, new processing techniques, and specifically the area of bioresources. We have the Welding Institute, which is supporting our oil and gas industry, and that does what it says on the tin, that they weld things, but they set the international standards for welding in the oil and gas industry. We also have a major private sector research and development organisation in Tata's Teesside Technical Centre, which is a high-temperature research institute. And we're working very closely with Tata at the moment to look at how we can support that research institute going forward and use some of the assets and intellectual property that's been developed in that centre to the benefit of the smaller companies that are outside of the steel-making industry and in the process industry sector, and that relationship's developed very well. But perhaps the most important relationships that we have are the relationships that we have with our businesses, our major international businesses, but also our smaller supply chain companies. And it's been interesting for me to come here this week and see so many of the names that we recognize actually up on this board here, with major plants, 2 major plants by Huntsman within our area, and an operating plant by Dow. So whilst our organisation is about setting the economic priorities and the strategy for the area, my team specifically is about engaging with businesses, and that's twofold. That's about engaging with the local businesses that we've got, and it's not about helping them to survive, it's about helping them to thrive. So we support them in their investment plans, and that could be capital investment plans, but it could be their innovation, or looking at new market opportunities through the export market, and we work very closely with UKT and I are here today and a part of our trip into India. We also look at opportunities to support productivity improvements and engender the culture of continuous change, using the techniques that have been derived by the major companies, some of the automotive and aerospace companies, and bring that best practice back down into the SMEs to the benefit of the whole supply chain. But I think the principal work that my team does is support companies, existing companies and potential new investors, to gain government support and government grants to support their investment. A specific focus on my team is to de-risk investments, and to do that we need to understand the businesses, we need to develop a relationship of credibility and trust, and we need to understand where the risks are within the company's potential investment. And that could be supply chain issues, it could be capital issues, it could be skills issues, and we're here to address each of those and work hand in hand with the companies. I think we're recognized as being the most successful local enterprise partnership in the country. Partly that's because we've been operating in this way, in this partnership working since 1996, and whilst local enterprise partnerships are relatively new, the concept of operating as a local enterprise partnership has been embodied in Tees Valley for nigh on 20 years. And in the short period of time that the LEP has been running, we've secured some significant successes. And particularly we've secured over £750 million worth of capital investment, which has led to the creation and safeguarding of over 3,000 jobs. And we've done that by securing a significant amount of government support to support our major industries. And as I go through the presentation, I'll mention a few names and a few examples of the companies who have invested. And we've helped them all to do that with government support. So we've secured around about 180 million, as it will be by the end of this month. It's 160 on the slide, but we're expecting a new tranche of funding to come through to support specific projects that we're working on. And to give you a context of why that's so important and why that's so significant to us, in previous years, the government support into our area has been round about £6 million per annum. And over the last 3 years, it's risen to £60 million per annum. And much of that support has gone into supporting investments by the process industry sector. We're now taking over responsibility for European funding that comes into our area. So we're managing the remnants of the last batch of European funding, which is circa £11 million. But going forward, and from the middle of this year and for the next 6 years, we'll be managing a total fund of £174 million. And much of that money will be to support the skills agenda, but particularly innovation within SMEs. We're also responsible for securing money into the area for major traffic infrastructure. We've secured over £50 million to support our road and rail networks. I thought I'd put a map of our area up, or a satellite shot of our area, because seeing this kind of makes sense. And there was a key thing that was mentioned about integration. And as Ian mentioned, Tees Valley hosts the largest integrated chemical complex in the UK and the second largest in Europe. The red line that's on the map represents a major study area. It was a piece of work that we commissioned with NEPIC back in 2008, and it looked at the key infrastructure that we have across Tees Valley. As you can see, the River Tees, which runs through Tees Valley, is probably the most significant natural piece of infrastructure that we have. And the red line boundary, just at the bottom left corner, represents the start of the working river, as we call it. To the left of that is the leisure part of the river, and if you're fit enough, you can go rowing and canoeing on the Tees. It's not something I've taken advantage of, as you can probably tell. But the working river is critical to each of our industry, our process industry and our steelmaking industry. If I start at the top, and it's actually just off the map, there's a key piece of infrastructure in Hartlepool, which is Hartlepool Docks. Hartlepool Docks is in the private sector ownership of PD Ports, and it's a major facility for the oil and gas industry and our emerging renewable offshore industry. We have a significant cluster of subsea technical companies, and a major company called JDR Cables is located there. We supported to bring them into the area, and they produce array cabling and interconnection lines for offshore wind turbines, but also umbilical cords and control cords for unmined gas process stations. In this area here, we have Hartlepool Nuclear Power Station. Hartlepool Power Station produces around about 1 gigawatt of power and is licensed to run until 2019. We worked with the owner, EDF Energy, to secure the status of that site for a new build nuclear power plant. We're only one of 8 areas in the UK that's managed to gain that consent. And we did it by working closely with the company and looking at the economic impact of not just the decommissioning of the existing power station, but also the rebuild. And I use that as an example because I think that's testament to how industry is viewed in Tees Valley. There aren't that many areas of the UK that would be particularly welcome of a nuclear power station, especially one that's so close to the residential areas. But there's a strong recognition that our industry, our power industry, our process industry, our steelmaking industry is a key part of our communities. And it's been interesting hearing the discussions on responsible care and how you can integrate industry into your communities. I finished my MBA with a dissertation that looked at corporate social responsibility within the process industry sector. And it was very interesting for me in my discussions with the companies to determine that actually the regulatory license to operate, whilst obviously was important, it's legislation, the companies had to adhere to it. There was a strong desire and focus on what we call the community license to operate. And that's the ability to gain support from your local community so that you can integrate your chemical plans, your expansion plans into the economy of Teesside without problem. And sometimes issues do occur. We've had some issues with emissions from one of our companies in Wilton. But because the companies have taken time and care to communicate with the local industry, whilst it's been irritating, it's been accepted that the company is dealing with the problem and it's a short-term problem. It will be addressed. And that's been dealt with, and it's overcome pretty well. Moving on around Teesside, or Tees Valley, we have this area here, which is an area called Seaton Port. In this area, we've supported a local company to create what will be the world's largest dry dock. And just last week, the largest dockside crane came into place. The company has just won a new contract to decommission 3 topside oil rigs from Shell and the jacket foundation from Shell. And that shows again the willingness to engage with major companies and the sort of industry that we're looking to attract. On this side of the Tees, the north side of the Tees, is our industrial logistics, our bulk liquid logistics handling facilities. One of the facilities is operated by Vopak, the other one is operated by Simon Storage, and we have a third facility just down in this area here. whilst we have major infrastructure and major logistics infrastructure, there needs to be the professional business services, the professional companies that can help connect that infrastructure to the client. And that's where the supply chain comes in. And on this visit, we've been joined by 3 logistics companies, Agility, and Neil Moon's with us, apologies. And they're a total logistics solutions provider, so they will identify for companies the best route to get your products to market and the best handling facilities to utilize. We also have Casper Shipping, a shipping agent that charter ships to get your product into market, and Johnson Partnership, a freight forwarding company that ensures that once the product has hit the port, it will clear the port and be delivered to your customers in a timely and efficient manner. If we move over to the other side of the Tees, we can see the steelworks which wrap round the Tees port area. The steelworks, the blast furnace is now owned by a Thai company, SSI, and all of our steel is exported. The blast furnace was reopened, and SSI have made over £1 billion worth of investment, and that facility is now one of the most efficient plants in Europe. But surrounding the steelworks is Tata's long products. We have a significant relationship with Tata. The long products division is based here, producing steel for the construction industry. We also have Tata Tubes, which produce steel pipes for the offshore oil and gas industry, and Tata Special Profiles, which produce product that goes into the off-road automotive sector. PDT's port is the fourth largest port in the UK. This side of the Tees is focused on bulk solids and cargo, whilst the north side of the Tees is focused on bulk liquids. This rather busy map starts to show the sorts of users that we have in our area. In particular, it demonstrates a piece of work that we've been working on with NEPIC, again to improve our infrastructure and improve the integration of the process industry sector, with the private sector giving us the steer and taking a lead as to what our investment plans should be, and the public sector pulling together the information and the business case for investment. So what we have here is a pipeline infrastructure that runs across the Tees, connecting the whole of the Teesside area, integrating 3 discrete sites with pipeline corridors. And our ambition is to create an industrial carbon capture and storage system that will capture CO2 from individual operating plants, allow the plants to plug into the industrial network, and then use that CO2 for enhanced oil recovery as it pipelined or shipped out to the North Sea to extract the remnants of the North Sea oil. We're also working on another significant project, which is shown in the red, which is a district heating scheme, possibly not that relevant in India, as I've discovered your climate is much more temperate, but I've just left home and I was scraping ice off my car to get to the airport on a morning. But the district heating scheme is looking at using low-grade steam that's the remnants from our power generation to heat industrial applications. And the first project that's benefited from that was a project that I worked on and that was established a while ago, which is a 35-acre glass house which is growing tomatoes, which, given our climate in Teesside, is quite remarkable. It actually uses CO2 from grow house and fertilizer plants and the low-grade steam from their power station to grow tomatoes in a controlled environment. And we're looking to extend that network through to further industrial areas, and the next plant that we're looking to connect into it is a potato chip company. And they'll use that steam to wash and clean the potatoes to go into their production processes. And then we'll move the infrastructure around and then pull it into some public buildings, one of which is a prison, because we like to keep our prisoners comfortable. But then also we'll start to extend it back into our residential areas. This next map kind of simplifies things a little bit. It shows the key process industry sites across Teesside that are connected by the pipeline corridors. The blue area is Billingham. Billingham is an estate that was developed in the 1920s to produce ammonia and fertilizer. And still on that site, those manufacturing assets exist, albeit they have been brought up to date quite significantly. And we supported GrowHow with a recent significant investment in the reduction of their greenhouse gases. But also on the Billingham estate, we now have major companies such as Johnson Matthey, who we've supported to develop a new R&D facility. There are three elements to Johnson Matthey in our patch. There's Johnson Matthey catalysts, there's emissions technology, and then there's also process technology. And we've supported each of those over the last couple of years. We also have Fujifilm Biosynth, who are a biotech company that's just opened its mammalian cell culture production facility, which is a third-party manufacturing facility. And they're using new technologies, single-use reactors and single-use mixers to produce their product. Oops. In the red area, which is an area known as Seal Sands or North Tees, this is an area where ConocoPhillips are located. And they bring in, or they have the capacity to bring in over 800,000 barrels of oil into Teesside for processing. The plant takes out the natural gas liquids from the crude oil and then exports it through its logistics facility. We also have the pipeline that brings in 20% of the UK's gas into our area, and similarly it's processed by Teesside Gas Processing Plant, and then it connects into the BP CATS, the Central Area Transmission System, for transmission around the rest of the UK. And we have SABIC's ethylene liquefaction facility, which it uses to export its ethylene into European markets and beyond. And in the yellow area, we have Wilton International. Oh, you rang. I'll be very quick. My apologies. How this translates into enterprise zones. Government gave us the opportunity to develop enterprise zones in our area. In fact, the government offered the opportunity to create one enterprise zone. Because we have quite a strong plan and a buy-in from our local businesses, we were able to negotiate with government, and as a consequence, we now have 12 enterprise zones. There are different types of enterprise zones, and we help the government formulate its plans on enterprise zones. The first type offers local business rate relief, which is a local property tax. And we can offer companies a relief of up to £55,000 per year against their local property tax. But in our discussions, and it's obvious with the sorts of companies that we have on our patch, that's not a benefit to a company that's about to invest a few £100 million. So we negotiated with government and helped them shape a new type of tax relief, which is called enhanced capital allowances. And we have 4 sites which offer enhanced capital allowances, which give companies the opportunity to reduce their corporation tax liability on the first £100 million worth of plant and equipment they invest in the area. An example of an ECA site, as we call them, is Wilton International, where we have 5 different plots on the Wilton International estate, running from 150 acres and above to between 30 and 50 acres. So we've got individual plots for people to invest in. So we have 12 sites, 23 different plots. We can offer business rate relief and we can offer enhanced capital allowances to companies. But also as part of the de-risking process for companies investing in the area, we've negotiated a simplified planning regime, which comes back to your regulatory license to operate. So again, we recognise the barrier to investment is the ability to build the plant and equipment on Teesside. So we've simplified that whole process, and we've secured significant investment from the government to plug in superfast broadband into those sites. But most importantly for us, the government has given us the opportunity to retain the business rates that go alongside with investments on those sites. So for example, Air Products, which are building a new plasma gasification plant on Teesside, it's a £350 million investment. That will generate over £1 million worth of enterprise-owned business rates, which will come back into the local enterprise partnership, and we can reinvest that into programs of activities, of infrastructure to support our process industry. And we're waiting the sign-off from Air Products of the second part of that investment, which will see another £350 million invested onto Teesside. On the smaller side of things, we have Tracerco, who invested on a business rates relief site, and the National Biologics Facility, which is a key R&D facility which is opened in the UK on our patch. I thank you for your time. I apologise for making you ring the bell. I promised that I wouldn't. But I do hope you found it interesting, and I hope you take the opportunity to speak with myself and my colleagues over the rest of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lear. Unlimited is sometimes in spirit, not in letter. Since we've moved on, I'll take a couple of questions to the panel. We've got people from a lot of places. And then you can interact probably over lunch. So very quickly, if there are a couple of questions, I'll take them, otherwise we'll just...
Hello, I'm Satyan Daga from Daga Chemicals. Dr. Hariharan, I have an office in China for the last 10 years, and my son was also there for 2 years. So whatever I'm saying with experience and conviction. Capital controls to labor exploitation, to shadow banking, to IPR violation, human rights violations. Capital construction to the kind of, ghost towns and the cities overspending on infrastructure what China has done. Do you think that in coming decade, China is sitting on a volcano like Jasmine Spring, economic, politically and socially challenged because of one-party rule, one-child policy, doing more harm than the good?
Am I audible? Oh, yeah. Okay. One of the reasons why China was appearing in the second page of Dr. Stillard's slide on Transparency International is precisely this. What is also bothering them is the huge NPAs, which many of the huge banks which they have, which is also a thing. That's one of the reasons why they are cooling down their economy, because rapid growth over 30 years does bring its own problems. Now, when you talked of, you raised questions about human rights violations. Now, the Chinese people have chosen. They have chosen the revolution. They have chosen to live the way they want. They have chosen their government. And they are quite comfortable with the one-party rule and the authoritarian rule, because at the end of the day, the man on the street is happy. We may have a great democracy. If I go out and ask the man on the street, are you happy? I may not get the same answer.
Dr. Arup and Vipul Bhai, would you like to comment something on China?
Sorry, where is that question?
No, it's from Daga.
Would you like to comment something on China, what he said and what I said? Any counter view from your side?
No, I don't think we should, we spend a lot of airtime thinking about China, and I think if we spend that energy thinking about our own issues, I think that's probably better. They have certain processes that leads to certain outcomes, and we have a different set of processes that will lead to different outcomes. And once in a while, if you're surrounded by some phenomenal capability which you aspire to, which you haven't got, we are all human, it's okay to badmouth them a little bit. No harm. As long as you're not doing it very violently and, causing some great environmental damage, it's okay. It's a sort of next level of gossip. But it's okay. If it de-stresses you, go ahead.
Satyan, I think we'll have a talk during dinner time.
I have one card that's come as a question from Mr. Tarun Narang to you. How do you foresee the competitiveness of Middle East petrochemicals industry versus US, especially on shale gas-based petrochemicals? Sorry, it's to Vishnu. Sorry.
It's Vishnu.
I could even dream that this question is coming after my speech today. Well, what we observe is, let me see that. Yeah. I mean, In the immediate future, I don't think there is going to be any kind of scare that's going to be caused across the Middle East because of recent developments in shale gas. Because yes, there's I think 6 plants have announced setting up capacities in the U.S. To tap into shale gas reserves. But I think Middle East is using a combination of feedstock now. I think the last plant to be awarded ethane allocation was Sipchem, that was way back in 2007, but they're using a combination of feedstocks. Whatever interactions that we've had, of course, when I have interactions with companies, obviously nobody is going to obviously tell you about any kind of scare that shale gas causes. But I mean, at the end of the day, we are a global company. We have offices in different parts of the globe. And when we do our analysis on how shale gas is impacting petrochemical feedstocks in different parts of the world, the conclusion is we don't see this as an immediate threat to Middle East producers. What might happen is some of the exports, of course, from Middle East to the North American region might reduce, but I don't see this as a threat to Middle East feedstocks as such, at least for the next 4 to 5 years.
If I need to add a point on what the Chinese are thinking about the impact of shale gas, is they are looking at from terms of 2020 to 2025, that plan, and they do want to increasingly focus on shale gas because they have, around 28 trillion, that's what their shale gas reserves are. And they are seriously looking at it because what's happening is with more and more excavations happening, and they want to enchant because the way the economy there is growing, if they want to sustain the kind of economy, and even with a 7.5% GDP growth, which they have declared now, if they want to maintain that over the next 20 years, shale gas is going to play. And they are also very conscious at the resurgence in American gas prices at $2, and which is really is a thing point for them because they are at $8 now, and they really do want to fix that.
Just one thing to add on to that, I mean, Middle East themselves, companies there, the region itself, hasn't looked into tapping into shale gas reserves that it has. It's very nascent at this stage, so time will tell in terms of how they would like to tap into those reserves to see how they can compete with the US should major developments happen as a result of shale gas discoveries in the US.
Thanks. I think other questions we can take on later. With this, I think I'll bring this to a close. I want to thank Mr. Lear, especially because we have a model now where you can have 700,000 citizens living around a nuclear power plant, a chemical complex, and a steel industry with a fresh water river running by. So you have a model which can now be tweaked for the kind of requirements that we have and the kind of conversations that we have in our country. Yeah, I think it's time we have some more power here. But the point is, if you plan and you design things rightly, all of this can be accommodated. And we are always looking for solutions and models which then you can extend. So with that, I'd like to thank Mr. Stillard, Mr. Shankaran, Dr. Hariharan, Mr. Shah, and Mr. John Lear for really illuminating presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. What a brilliantly chaired session. Mr. Arup Basu holds a PhD from UMICT, Manchester, and B from Imperial College, London. A survey that was published in December 2013 said that UK was the most preferred destination for university degrees amongst Indians. I'm going to say this to Mr. Ian Wright, that we are looking forward for increased bilateral trade with India and all cooperation that both the countries can have together. I am now going to request the session chairman to hand over the mementos to our speakers, please. Mr. S.J. Stillard, Huntsman International. Huntsman has evolved from being a packaging business company to one of the largest chemical companies, and the Huntsman Cancer Institute is the youth step for world-class CSIR. Mr. Vishnu Shankaran, Associate Director, Frost & Sullivan, thank you for your perspective on the Middle East and sharing your trends based on your intensive and modeling techniques. Dr. S. Hariharan, Joint Managing Director, Solaris Chemtech. Thank you for your perspective on China firsthand and giving us our standard on flexibility and agility. Never mind, it's just before lunch. Mr. Vipul S. Shah, your presentation on Sadara's offers on the 3 million metric tons of the largest greenfield investment in Saudi Arabia soon, sir. And Mr. John Lear, Senior Business Investment Manager, Tees Valley. That was a very refreshing presentation. And what your website says about your aim is that we deliver jobs for economic growth. I think a lot of our political parties here can imbibe that simple 4 words. And Yogesh Bhai, I'm going to request you to please hand over Dr. Arup Basu his memento, please. You can be part of the photograph, sir. You are the Bhishma Pitama, as they said in the morning. I think that was a very, very productive session, extremely knowledgeable and high data-centric presentations. All of them will be available on the CDs, which ICC will be distributing after the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be breaking for our lunch now, and we should be back by 2:40 in the hall so that we can finish the day in time. Enjoy your lunch break. Thank you, everyone.